2002 Chevrolet Suburban 5.3 liter engine with the Vortec system on it. We're going to be removing the intake manifold gasket. The vehicle was running lean, got some lean codes. The old PO174 code came up, and what the vehicle was doing was when you would first crank it up, particularly on a cold morning, the RPMs just wouldn't stabilize. It was just hopping around. The computer was wanting to put too much fuel to the vehicle. It was lurching and surging for a few minutes after startup, and then once the vehicle warmed up, everything would kind of calm down, and the engine would run fine. But at startup, you could really notice it, and it just wasn't a fun experience. So it's time to do the intake manifold gasket. The vehicle's got about 235,000 miles on it, so this is well overdue, but it wasn't symptomatic until recently. What I have heard is some of these gaskets that they put in at the factory are inferior, and the rubber becomes compromised, and then you've got additional airflow, which causes that lean code to set, and your check engine light will come on. If you plug in a diagnostic tool, that's probably what you're going to see. So in order to start this operation, I'm a little bit into it already, probably about 40 minutes into it. What you want to do is first leave your battery connected, and then you want to take off your fuel cap, and in addition to that, you want to come over here to your fuse box, and you want to remove your fuel pressure, your fuel pump relay rather. And there's the relay there, and it goes in the socket right here. So remove that, crank the car a couple of times, see if you can get the system to depressurize. And then after you do that, you want to come over here on your fuel rail here and remove that cap and access your Schrader valve and put a screwdriver in there and depressurize the system there. I usually put a rag underneath it to catch any fuel that might squirt out. So once you've done that, actually I disconnect the battery before I go ahead and drain the fuel rail there at the Schrader valve. So you want to do that. So disconnect your battery, then drain the fuel at the Schrader valve. And then it's pretty straightforward. The first thing you've got to do is you've got to remove this plastic cover here so that you can access the intake, as well as that mounting bracket for the plastic cover that dresses up the engine. And then the boot here, you've got to remove that. And that boot runs from your air cleaner, your air filter box, over to your throttle body here. So I cleaned this throttle not long ago just as a maintenance item, but anyway, we're going to do this intake today. So once you do all that, really the first order of business is try to loosen up this wiring bundle here, and there's a bolt here a nut here that you've got to remove to lift that up, and that will all come out. That will loosen from the top of the intake. And then after that, I began to disconnect these wiring harnesses. So you've got one here that goes to your alternator, you've got one here that goes to your throttle position sensor. You've got another one that I have lying over here that goes to your intake control valve. The fuel related components I had to remove here at this juncture were the two fuel lines. You've got the incoming fuel line, and then the return that you've got to remove there. You can see the lines, and then it's got those quick connect and disconnect fittings, and then the fuel pressure regulator vacuum hose that has to be removed too. In order to disconnect those fuel lines, what I like to do is you can get one of these fairly cheap tools in an auto parts store. It just clips around there, you push it in, and then that pops loose those fuel pressure lines. Before you're able to put that quick disconnect tool in, though, you're going to have to remove these clamps that are, it's a measure there just to make sure that the line doesn't pop off. I like to keep a little bucket here when I'm working so that nothing falls. So once I remove it, I can put it in the bucket, put my tools in there so nothing falls within the engine bay. So in addition to some wiring harnesses, you can see I removed this one. There's one in the back here at the very back of the engine. It doesn't fall behind the engine, so it's fine just to remove, I think, and just leave it hanging there. And then there's a couple here that have to be removed. And in addition to that, you've got some vacuum lines with the emission control system that have to be removed. You've got one there. I've got another one here. It's a hose that has to be removed there. And I think you're going to find some of these hoses are a little difficult to come off. There's another hose here. It's another emissions control thing that it goes into the valve cover to, I guess, reburn anything that comes out of that. So, you know, for for the environment. Additionally, there are a couple of coolant lines that flow through the throttle body at the bottom here. Some of these lines are difficult to remove, so I say don't hesitate to spray a little WD-40 right where they connect, you know, to the intake if you have to. Additionally, one thing I like to do is wrap my grip balls teeth. You can wrap them in tape, or you can put a little rag around the hose so that you can pull it off a little bit easier, so that you don't damage the rubber in your hose or your vacuum lines when you're trying to remove those things. You don't want to put a lot of pressure on those because they might crack, or you could tear up the rubber. So once I got all of that removed, sort of from back to front, then I began to remove the retaining bolts here. So you can see I've got several of them already pulled up. I've got about 3 left, one on this side in the very back, and then 2 on the back there by the fuel lines that I have to pull. And I think at that point, and removing this coolant line in front, I'm probably going to be able to go ahead and lift that out of the engine there, and then take a look at what we've got with the existing gasket, and have to run uptown and buy the new one. So I've already called, made sure they had it in stock. Unfortunately, you are going to have to remove the wiring harnesses off of all 8 injectors. So in order to do that, wasn't happy about it, but in order to do it, it's got this little security sleeve on it, and so you need to take a pair of needle-nosed pliers and put them in there to compress this tab here at the top. See how that compresses in? That's the best way I found to do it. Compress that in, then you can remove this security sleeve and set it aside in a safe place. And then once you do that, then I found the most effective thing was this pick, just because you have limited space in there. And take a pick or something like that, and you're going to pry up on this little tab here. You're going to pry out on it, and then you're going to be able to remove that from the injector here. So remove the security sleeve. Once that's removed, this is on a 2002 Chevy Suburban, pry up on that tab, and then you can remove that. So that's good knowledge. If you have to change out an injector sometime, that's how you remove the wiring harness. A couple other things I had to remove is I had to remove the emission control line, the vacuum hose down. I think that's going to be your, I think they call it a PCV valve in back there. That vents into your the back of your valve cover, as well as the vacuum line that goes to your brake booster. It was under pretty heavy vacuum when I removed that, but I think it's probably easiest to remove it here. I'm going to try to pull the entire intake out the car with those 2 lines on them, because I think it's going to be easier to do it that way than have to remove a couple of clamps. So a couple of things. I finally got the intake removed here. Almost removed. Anyway, this coolant line on the passenger side, when I was working on it, the clip was rotated around back, so I couldn't access it. So because this line is so long that goes into the radiator, I just decided to go ahead. I knew I was going to lift it up and have the flexibility of the hose to be able to turn it over. So as a practice point, if your clip's turned around, you can always pull it out and then take the hose off after you have it out. This other line was difficult here on the coolant feed. I can't get back around to it, but I wound up finding that it was going to be easier to pull down at the lower fitting than it was at the one at the throttle body. So that's another thing. Again, the vehicle's got 235,000 miles on it. You can see the current gasket. I haven't done a full inspection of it. Got a lot of grime there. I mean, it doesn't look terrible, but you can see that there looks like you know, a little oil that's that has gotten past it. And certainly you know, there are areas, I haven't really done a full assessment of it yet, but just areas like in here that appears that, you know, I mean, if grit and grime is flowing across that, like this point right here, then you know air can get by it. But I'm gonna take a closer look once I pull it off, flip it over, and see see what I can see, and you can tell down here, I just can't believe that there's so much debris down in here. It's sad looking. Now, when I cleaned the top of the intake off before I did this, so this is stuff that had fallen below the intake. There was nothing. I mean, the top of the intake was clean as a whistle. There were no leaves or anything like that. So that must have fallen down in between the channels there. So that's going to have to be inspected, and all those intake channels got to be inspected and vacuumed out and everything. That's